Hi, and welcome back to the ghbond channel. Well, I haven't had anything to say about RMSL for a while, and now I've just got so much to say that this is going to be an overtime video. Start with, of course, the price crash today, and you may have heard why. RMSL had to admit that actually they don't have OTC QB approval, and their tweet left a lot of questions unanswered. But fortunately for us, we have Vortec302 from StockTwits who gave us a lot of the answers. And I am going to read directly from 3 separate posts that he made today, encapsulating the letter from Investor Relations. Vortec starts out with, "Say what you will, but the transparency and quick response means something." The response starts, "Mr. Wood had incorrectly misinterpreted an email from the OTC markets in regards to the status of the company's OTCQB application. Assuming that the company had been approved for uplisting to QB, the July 12th release was written by CEO Tom Wood and was requested by Mr. Wood to be set up for immediate distribution. On the morning of July 19th, the company was notified by OTC Markets Group that the company's OTCQB application was still under final review. To be clear, the application has not been accepted and has not been denied. It is under review. OTC Markets Group is aware of the July 12th release and has requested that a correction be made via formal press release as well as removal of all social media postings containing the July 12th release. The company has complied to these requests and is in active communication with the OTC markets. On behalf of Mr. Wood and the entire RemSleep team, we apologize for this error. Going forward, we intend to have our management team, as well as our SEC attorney, review all correspondence from OTC markets to ensure that a mistake like this doesn't happen again. On behalf of Mr. Wood and the entire RemSleep team, we apologize for this error. Going forward, we intend to have our management team, as well as our SEC attorney, review all correspondences from OTC markets to ensure that another mistake like this does not occur. Additionally, all press releases will be reviewed and approved by members of management, as well as the company's SEC attorney. Thank you." Well, with that additional information, we can clearly see what happened. I was starting to wonder if somebody maliciously sent them an approval notice, but it was just an honest mistake, misread letter. So let's take a look at the price action. Now this is the 1-minute chart from today. You can see the price was slowly drifting lower. And here's the announcement. The price drop got all the way down to 2 cents. And recovery, and if you sort of extend the action and the slope from earlier today to now, at the close, it really didn't make any difference, which makes a lot of sense. Because first of all, uplisting to QB is a non-issue. If anybody can show me a study that's been done that shows otherwise, I'd be happy to look at it. But in my experience, stock is just as likely to go down as up. I'm sure there were tons of people that thought that the recent rally was new players getting in now that it had QB, but obviously it didn't have QB, so obviously the rally above 3 cents didn't really have anything to do with that. It was really a non-event, with the exception that some people got a good bargain down here near 2 cents. So now we get into the portion of the show that gets a little bit more interesting. Unfortunately, it's going to seem a little bit like I'm going after RMSL, but you have to realize I am a huge stockholder in RMSL, so if I'm attacking them, I'm attacking my own bag. This is not an attack. This is what I must do, because when I see something, I have to basically tell you what I see and what I think about it. It's up to you to make your own decisions. Now we come to the part of the show that's going to get a little bit more interesting. As you may know, I own a lot of shares of RMSL, and it's in my best interest to say good things about the stock. However, today we're going to cover a new risk that I've discovered. So if you only want to hear good things about RMSL, it's probably a good time to end the video or cover your ears and say, nah, I can't hear you. Also remember, I'm just going to tell you my impressions. It's up to you to make your own decisions or hire an advisor. And companies like RMSL, represent a risk of potentially losing everything you invest in them because they're small, beginning, startup, and a large percentage of startups don't make it. So with that, let's get on with it. Now I'm going to read to you a statement that may sound familiar to you. It's been slightly modified for our purposes here. After repeated reviews from the company's FDA consultants, the company was informed that this would require filing a new 510K. The company was stunned by this revelation. The company has since exhausted every means possible to a pathway of using the company's original 510K. We have been silently working, struggling to give this good news. RemSleep has now passed through the grieving process and has initiated the steeper regulatory hill climb. All regulatory demands are in progress. This we can guarantee. RemSleep takes full responsibility for these delays and disappointments. Now, does this sound familiar? Well, it's a familiar sound, but this particular release is from November 19th, 2020. So let's dig into RMSL's struggles over the years to get FDA approval for this device. RMSL began in Q3, Q4 of 2020 when COVID was in vogue, thinking that they were going to get special emergency authorization or approval by piggybacking off an existing approval for another device. I guess they were encouraged by the FDA that that might work, but unfortunately it failed. The announcement that we just read is the result of that failure. So it failed, and to do another submission, more testing would be required. Q1, Q2 of 2021, we're all wondering where Tom's promised FDA approval is. A lot of us were new to RMSL at that time because a lot of us came in when the patent was approved, and we had read back, and Tom had promised that we would have FDA approval and we would have sales Q1 of 2021. So we all kind of figured that that was ongoing, but towards Q2, questions started to be asked. Then all of a sudden, it was announced that RMSL had hired a consultant. Great. So finally we did get an FDA submission, and the FDA evaluated it and said, hey, there's another test required, so more testing. Then in Q1, Q2 of 2022, which is earlier this year, you may remember we submitted the additional testing, and then the result was reclassification requiring, guess what, more testing. So now we come to Q3, Q4 of 2022, and hopefully in the near future we're going to learn from RMSL what's going to be required and what the time frame is and what progress they've made. But at this point we have to ask ourselves, why are we thinking of the FDA as this impassionate, impartial government agency? If we were paying attention during COVID, we realized that there's a level of corruption at the FDA. What if the FDA is just always going to say more testing? And believe me, with the amount of regulations they have, they can always find another test. Well, why would they do that? Well, I imagine that some of the larger companies may be tighter with the FDA than RMSL is. And I don't want to accuse anyone of anything, but we have to not be stupid and blind about this. We have to consider that maybe another company is influencing the FDA to never approve RMSL's device. In their mind, at some point, Tom will just get frustrated and sell the company cheap. Then they can pick the company up from Tom, have the device for themselves, and a month later they'll be selling it because they have the skids greased at the FDA. Now, that's just speculation, but I make my living in the markets by evaluating and detecting patterns. And the red more testing, more testing, more testing, although they're all explainable, it is a pattern. So I have to consider it. So what do you do with that information? Well, when you consider and you evaluate how you're investing in RMSL, you just have to add whatever percentage possibility you think it is that RMSL is never going to get approved because they're being blocked at the FDA, and you have to add that into your thinking. Maybe you think it's ridiculous, fine, add 0%. but it's something that I have noticed and I wanted to bring it to your attention. I don't plan on selling any RMSL after realizing this. It's just something that I will consider going forward. So let's take a look at the price action. Now, this is the price action here when we thought we were getting FDA approval. This is the collapse with the bottom at 1 penny right here. And then the almost immediate recovery to near 2 pennies. And then the rally up to 3 pennies. And then we had this somewhat surprising rally above 3 pennies. At 3.5 cents, I looked at the chart and said, okay, we're in the same area as before when we thought we were just imminently about to receive FDA approval. Now we're not imminently about to receive FDA approval, and we have no idea when we might have FDA approval, and we're at the same price level. Didn't make any sense to me. So I sold a small portion of my shares. Why did I do that? Because I like shares, and I figured when they dropped after the announcement, I'd be able to buy them back cheaper, and if I put the same amount of equity in, I get more shares. It's a way of multiplying shares. I love when I get to buy at 1 cent. I've done it so many times that most of my shares are at 1 cent. I don't think we'll get back there this time. And today was kind of a good example of where we might get. If you look at the drop here, we had about 15 versus about 5 here, so about 3 times the number of shares in this drop. However, with only 1/3 the volume, this did much more than 1/3 the price damage. So there's definitely room to drop. Now, why did it drop today, especially when the actual news item was such a non-item? What happens is it drops, and despite our best efforts to let people know that stop orders are not a good idea in dealing with small, low float stocks like this, we still get a bunch of people who are putting in stop orders, so those stop get triggered. And then there's something called a liquidity drive where the market makers like to force everything down through the stops as quickly as they can because it generates a lot of selling, and that gives them a chance to do a lot of buying. Not sure if that went on or not. I wasn't watching the tape at the time, but it's very possible. And you can see, of course, as we discussed, it recovered right back down to the same general area it was in. So that's really a non-issue. Now going forward, as soon as the announcement comes, the judgment will be, I suggested, it seems reasonable to me that there'll be October time frame for submission and approval. Depending on what that time frame is, if it's much sooner than October, you can expect an actual price increase. If it's a lot longer than October, then I would expect a price plunge. So it's kind of based on what expectations are, and I think it's realistic to look at October based on what we've seen in the past. And if you go back to our Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, kind of seems like sometime in Q3, Q4 would be the appropriate time to have that happen. If it's going to slip into next year, this thing's going to probably hit 1 penny again. At least I'll be looking for it to. And you kind of have to keep your ears open. RMSL has Twitter, and so if you're not set up to get a special tone on your phone every time you get a tweet from RMSL, I suggest you do that, because you'll want to be one of the first people to act on this information when it comes out. So I want to wrap this up tonight by going back to the cover of one of the first videos I did on RMSL. This unicorn stock will 10x. That was before I realized that people in startup business had a very specific meaning for the word unicorn. To me, it was just a unique stock. And will it 10x is the question. Well, when I said 10x, I was at the time expecting about 25 cents would be a 10x. So do I still think RMSL can reach that level? Certainly a lot of the things that RMSL's been doing are good. They actually started generating revenue, they paid down some debt, and they're working diligently to get their FDA approval. So I see no reason on the face of it that RMSL can't reach the 25 cents that I originally thought they would to get the 10x. Now, is there a potential problem with the FDA? only time will tell. But as long as we can clear the FDA hurdle, I think it's a reasonable goal. And originally I thought we'd see it this year. Actually now I expect 25 cents, if it does happen, will more likely happen next year. So that's it for this episode. Sorry everything wasn't rainbows and unicorns, but have to deal with facts as I see them. So get your phone set up for Twitter alerts, and let's hope Tom has better news for us in his next tweet.